Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, when I was dead broke, man, I couldn't picture this. Yes, kids, once upon a time, the idea of owning both major game consoles was considered so unheard of that it made sense for hip-hop artists to use it as a lyrical shorthand for previously unimagined comforts of commercial wealth. To put it another way, I was a Nintendo kid in the 8 and 16-bit era, and for a time I may have bought a little too heavily into the imagined marketing rivalry aspect of the whole thing. So I didn't have a ton of contact with Genesis games in their original time frame, but I've since worked hard to catch up, and hey, turns out I missed out on a lot. I'm the Game OverThinker, and these are my top 10 favorite Genesis exclusives. And just so we're clear, that means games or substantially different versions of games that were only on the Genesis. No direct multi-platform releases, no arcade ports. Number 10, Disney's Aladdin. So, the Genesis had a lot of cool Disney-branded games that nobody else got, including this interactive version of Aladdin that's not as iconic as the Capcom one from the Super Nintendo, but might be a little bit better. Back in the day, I mostly thought it was because the Genesis one let you use a sword, but really it's much more about balance. We remember the Capcom Disney games not only for their animation and sound caliber, but for usually having at least one ridiculously difficult area. The Genesis version was a bit more fair, humane on the difficulty curve, and that, plus the kind of solid design sensibilities you expect from Virgin in the 90s, make it one of the more solid platformers exclusive to the Genesis. If you've only ever played the Nintendo version, make sure you give this one a look. Number 9, Mickey's World of Illusion. Speaking of Sega and Disney, I'm continually surprised at how many people from Genesis-exclusive childhoods I hear from who feel it was the Mickey Mouse platformers, not Sonic the Hedgehog, that was truly their answer to the Mario series back in the day. And it's easy to see why. If you only ever played the various Mickey games released on Nintendo and PC platforms, you might be under the impression that there was Magical Quest, Mousecapades, and not really a whole lot else that wasn't crap. But over on the Genesis, there was the Illusion series and a whole bunch else, and they're almost all uniformly good to great classical-style platformers, goosed up with gorgeous Disney-derived artwork. Castle of Illusion is certainly the classic, but World of Illusion lets you play as my main man Donald Duck too, so you'd best believe I'm giving it the edge. Tight controls, character-specific bonus stages, and striking graphics. What's to dislike? Number 8, Ecco the Dolphin. Sega's main logline on the Genesis was that it was the edgy alternative to all things Nintendo, and while that was enormously successful as an ad campaign, it also saddled the console with an unfair secondary reputation as the poster child for gaming's most lowbrow sensibilities, a machine designed to feed angry little boys a steady diet of simple-minded violence and schlocky aggro wish fulfillment, all of which just made said angry little boys love it more, but didn't do justice to the many other thoughtful, whimsical, higher-minded games that were widely available for the system, but not nearly as aggressively advertised. The Ecco the Dolphin series was Sega's big public push in the West to do damage control on that image, offering an admirably unique title that boasted lovingly rendered oceanic graphics and topical ecology-minded storylines. It was also completely and utterly bonkers, a game that looked like a dolphin-themed motivational poster, but wound up sending players on bizarre adventure that had probably found its dolphin hero exploring lost cities and facing off with alien interlopers. Ecco is as weird as they come, but it's also beautiful. Number 7, Castlevania Bloodlines. The Genesis got only one Castlevania game. Just one. That must have sucked, especially considering that this was during that first decade or so when there were basically no such things as bad Castlevania games. Simon Quest is misunderstood, shut up. But if you had to get one, it might as well have been Bloodline, which takes the pre-Symphony of the Night straightforward platforming formula of the series up to that point and adds the main thing you weren't going to get from the Nintendo version. Lots and lots more blood and gore. And if there's a classic series that demands that kind of improvement, it's definitely the one about a family of oddly well-dressed European mercenaries murdering vampires with enchanted bullwhips. You know, this series is kind of kinky when you think about it, huh? Anyway, it's not exactly the deepest or most richly textured Castlevania, but Bloodlines is a hell of a good time. Number 6, Rocket Knight Adventures. Mascot platformers. Yeah, there were too goddamn many of them, and a lot of them were pretty average games dressed up with cartoon animal gimmicks, but I'll still take them over modern gaming's endless succession of glowering, poorly groomed white dudes. Any way you slice it, Rocket Knight Adventures and Sparkster are among the best of their field, a whimsical fairy tale atmosphere that crossed sci-fi fantasy craziness for a franchise that somehow didn't quite catch on at the time, but is now justly remembered as an all-time classic. Yes, it was Konami doing more or less what everyone else was trying to do at the time, but a standout is a standout, and there's a good reason why people are still hungry for more Sparkster after all these years. Number 5, Eternal Champions. Sega's Genesis exclusive answer to the Street Fighter craze may be best remembered as one of the only remotely good reasons to buy a Sega Activator, but as 2D fighters go, it's still an overlooked entry in the genre and easily the best to have originated on the Genesis itself. Sure, in terms of story and design, it's very, very similar to Time Killers, but Eternal Champions was actually a good game with very interesting controls and a winning set of original characters, courtesy of veteran comic book artist Ernie Chan. Like a lot of 2D fighters, there's not necessarily that much else to say about it in depth, but it remains one of the unsung gems of the Genesis era and a reminder that there were very few things Sega Interactive couldn't excel at when they put their heads together. Number 4, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. As a diehard devotee of Team Mario in the 90s, I tried my hardest to not like Sonic the Hedgehog, and a lot of the time Sega seemed willing to help me with that front by overextending their winning mascot into weak spin-offs and diminishing sequels almost as soon as he arrived on the scene. But while I'll agree that 3 and Knuckles had a lot of novelty and the original game will always be more iconic, it's the sequel that grudgingly won me over. Sonic 2 is everything that worked in the first game polished and primed into a superior follow-up with gorgeous graphics and gameplay so responsive it's impossible to care that the series' much-touted element of speed mostly boils down to some graphical trickery than whatever the hell blast processing was supposed to be. Also, it has to be said, Tails is a great addition to the franchise, a character who seems like he should be an Orko-level annoyance, but instead, well, actually I liked Orko too, so that may not be the best example. As far as I'm concerned, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was as good as the Sonic games ever got, and still feels like a masterpiece, even as Sonic himself is way past his sell-by date at this point. Number 3, Kid Chameleon. Even after they'd struck gold with Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega just couldn't stop trying to make more Mario of their own. The result of one such experiment was this classic platformer that put a 90s comic book style spin on the costume power-up gimmick from earlier titles like Super Mario Bros. 3 and married them to an endearingly cheesy virtual reality storyline for a winning combination. What sets Kid Chameleon apart from his platformer brethren for the most part, though, is the sheer size of the game itself. You only really have to play through roughly half of them, but there are 103 full levels in Kid Chameleon, and that's not counting an additional 32 smaller ones that can be discovered through exploration through the game's various portals and alternate paths. It's not quite open world enough about all that space to be part of the Metroidvania camp, but Kid Chameleon offered a rare level of replayability among Genesis platformers and a quirky sense of humor that kept me coming back all the time. Number 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Hyperstone Heist. Once again, this is a favorites list, not the same thing as a best list, and in the mid-90s there were few things that would more convincingly land you near my list of favorite anythings than anything to do with the Ninja Turtles. Objectively, Hyperstone Heist is not one of the best Turtle games. Now, that would be an interesting list, wouldn't it? But it's a solid Genesis exclusive that almost makes up for the lack of a Genesis Turtles in time. The bright, high-contrast graphics and very impressive sprite animation give it a distinctive look among the other Turtles games, and it features easily the best video game incarnation of Leatherhead, always one of the cooler C-list villains from the franchise in my estimation. And it's one of the only 2 games in the series, and the only one on consoles, where you get to fight Master Tatsu from the first 2 movies. That's pretty cool. No, I won't pretend that it's the best Genesis game ever, but it's one of the ones I always had the most fun with whenever I had the opportunity to play it. Number 1, Streets of Rage 3. 2D brawlers were invented for arcades, and that's pretty much the ideal place for that genre, but the fact remains one of the best examples of the form ever created. The Streets of Rage games were developed exclusively for consoles by Sega. Crossing Final Fight speed with Double Dragon's urban dystopia somehow evens out into a series that trumps them both in terms of arresting visuals and brutal addictive gameplay. The characters are weird and unforgettable, the music and sound effects are iconic, you can play as a kangaroo if you want, and yes, also a profoundly uncomfortable homophobic stereotype that got cut out of the international versions, but holy shit, Japan, what the hell? Still, warts and all, in this genre comprised mainly of punching and kicking your way through a Japanese game designer's lurid imagine of a crime-ridden metropolitan American dystopia, Streets of Rage is the pop art pinnacle of the form, and the third installment is where the series itself reached its zenith. And that's the list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell us about it in the comments, and suggest other lists you might like to see. Remember to like, subscribe, share with all your friends, and please consider donating to the MovieBob Patreon to support this and other series like it. Hey gang, here's a question that keeps coming up. If your handle is moviebob, where are your movie reviews? Well, my old reviews are in a lot of places. You'll find many of them on my YouTube channel, but you'll find the brand new ones on Geek.com, an awesome site that's also your one-stop news source for science, TV, gaming, technology, nerd culture, the works. You can find all my reviews directly by going to geek.com/author/bchipman, because that's my real name, and you can get regular updates on all my reviews and all of Geek.com's other great content by signing up for their kick-ass newsletter at subscribe.geek.com. And don't forget to also subscribe to the Geek.com YouTube channel, where you'll find the videos that accompany my reviews and tons of other great content too. Remember, that's Geek.com, the Geek.com newsletter, and Geek.com on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss out on all the latest MovieBob reviews. You can also check out my own new website, MovieBob Central, where you'll find my blog, links to all my work, and shop for my books, ebooks, and future MovieBob products. And please remember to like these videos, share them with all of your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching another MovieBob production.